Béatrice Adjage, RTL.
Monsieur le Président,
Donald Trump et vous-même, on a le
we,
sentiment d'un
after listening
dialogue
to you and
de
Donald
sourds,
Trump, we
d'une opposition de plus en plus frontale.
perceive a
Alors, le
dialogue
combat est rude,
of
vous
the
décidez de
deaf
l'engager, mais est-ce qu'il
and a
n'est
very
pas
difficult
inégal?
dialogue. Isn't it an unequal struggle?
De quel point de vue?
From what point of view? I talked a lot about inequality. What do you mean by an unequal? Unequal from what point of view? You denounce the rule of the strongest, and the US is the top economic power in the world. If I talked in the name of France earlier, I am trying to defend a vision based on values, on a political project which goes beyond the borders of our country, which is supported by the EU and by the United Nations. When we fight for the Paris Accord, we're fighting for an agreement that all the sovereign states have signed up to, and we have to support. Nobody, we're not isolating ourselves. We are moving forward. We're not moving forward fast enough. We have taken a number of initiatives, but when you have decided to fight, you can go ahead and do so immediately. As regards trade, there are international rules which are not totally satisfactory, but do we solve the differences by returning to protectionism and a trade war? I don't think so. We are engaging in dialogues, not only through France, but also the World Trade Organization, the EU. When I express my views in favor of cooperation, regional cooperation, and the defense of what we have all created within the UN, the UNRWA, UNESCO, I defend what we have done as a sovereign people. So you mustn't see the opposition between two countries. Today, France is very much attached to defending the UN organization, the principles of the United Nations organization, and the universalism, which has, in fact, was the very origin of the United Nations. So what has happened is not an opposition between two countries, but the fact that we do not have to support the unilateral decision of one country to withdraw. What is France's position regarding the membership of Saudi Arabia as an observer of the UOIF? What is France's position regarding the membership of Saudi Arabia as a member of the OIF? Have you already spoken to the president of the Rwanda, who is the president of the African Union? What did you discuss with him? What do you think of the liberation of former President Gbagbo? On the first point, we will be working with the Secretary General on expressing our views on this subject. A few weeks on, we will be talking about this in Yerevan. I will be meeting this afternoon President Kagame. We will be talking about the bilateral relationship between our country and economic development, and we'll also be talking about regional crisis and the role of the African Union. And in this regard, France is strongly committed to supporting the greater involvement of the African Union in settling regional crises, and more particularly, we are committed to intensifying UN action, and I will be discussing that again this afternoon. As I said in my speech, I think we should organize operations in fighting terrorism based on partnership between the African Union, the United Nations, and decisions will be made by the end of the year. Better coordination between the African Union and the UN is very important, and we'll be discussing various sensitive issues affecting the continent. and we'll probably talk about Francophonie, French language and culture. President Kagame defends the candidature of his country for being Secretary General of Francophonie. Regarding the last question, it's not for me to give my views on domestic issues. International law should be respected at all times and everywhere, but in countries that have enjoyed a democratic transition, a reconciliation process should also be implemented. We always encourage whoever favors a transition that will lead to greater stability.
Je recommence. C'est bon là? Pardon, excusez-moi.
Paul
Laroutier au quotidien, je veux vous demander pourquoi vous avez maltraité
Why
votre pupitre comme ça à la fin et que Donald Trump n'était pas là pour vous
hit
écouter, mais
your
était visé dans votre
desk
discours.
when
Qu'est-ce que
you
vous
were
attendez
speaking
très concrètement
when
de
President
cette
Trump
politique pour le moment
wasn't
dans ce
there?
Merci.
Je présenterai toutes mes excuses
I
au
will
pupitre,
apologize to the
mais
desk,
vous avez raison.
to the podium for having hit it with my hands. I hope I won't hit this one. No, I was very passionate because I believe very strongly in what in my views. In this period, we are facing risks of cynicism or getting used to cynicism. If we're all getting used to the worst possible discourses and cynicism, I don't think we're up to the challenges facing the world today. We had a discussion yesterday with President Trump, which allowed us to observe some disagreements, but to move forward nevertheless. I would like to move forward with the US positively on various issues. First of all, on the Syrian issue, there is a change in the US position in this regard, which I would like to pay tribute to. The US is more committed to Syria, to the Syrian issue than it used to be. The United States agree with us on the importance of the humanitarian emergency in Idlib, and they share our determination to favor a political settlement and to have a real inclusive process and to accelerate the move towards elections and a new constitution. So I'm waiting for the US views on this. So this is the method. We respect sovereignty of the people. We work with international cooperation to get quicker results. I would like to talk to the US also about Iran. We have a methodological difference of views regarding the 2015 agreement. The United States, in President Trump's speech, they do want to get an agreement. He said that they have taken a strong position. They want to get guarantees regarding nuclear power, ballistic missiles, and regional borders. This is the line we defended a year ago. I would like us to build with different methods the solution that will bring peace to the region and find a sustainable solution on Iran. As regards trade, the EU we want to limit conflicts with the United States on trade. We had a dialogue at the beginning of the summer on that issue. So on a case-by-case basis, we are convincing each other that cooperation is a good approach. Choices have been made. I would like the United States to join us and to support the Paris Accord. I'm not very optimistic in the short term. On the contrary, we must accept. I regret the decision taken by the International Penal Court, the UNRWA and UNESCO, and I hope the US will come back to UNESCO. We will not give in regarding the strength of our messages, of our values. We want to work with the United States, which is a partner for settling regional crises and for security and getting results.
From India, I just had a question on multilateralism because that's a big focus of the Secretary General. When do you see Security Council reform expansion actually happening? And a second question, because it's the biggest thing currently in India and it's got to do with Rafale. Did the government of India
Could you repeat the first question? Sorry.
Multilateralism?
Yes?
Multilateralism is what the Secretary General has mentioned is one of his key priorities.
Yeah.
So he says, I'm asking you, when do you think that Security Council reform expansion will actually happen? Okay. That's the first. And the second is about the biggest controversy currently in India about the Rafale deal. And did the government of India tell France or Dassault at any point that they had to accept reliance as an India partner for the Rafale deal?
Look, for the second question, I will be very clear. It was a government-to-government discussion, and I just want to refer to what Prime Minister Modi very clearly said a few days ago. And I have any other comment to say. I was not in charge at that time, but I know that we have very clear rules, and this is a government-to-government discussion. And this contract is part of a broader framework, which is a military and defense relation between India and France. And this one is very important to me because this is a strategic relation and not just an industrial relation. So that's my point, and I just want to refer to what Prime Minister Modi said on this situation. As for multilateralism, if you listen to me carefully, I supported and clearly endorsed the process launched by the Secretary General. I'm not in charge of the timetable, and I'm not the one to lead it, but I will support it, and it is the Secretary General to explain and say in details when it will be feasible. But I do believe we have to broaden precisely our way to cooperate in the different fora of regulation. That's why I do support the fact that we have to reform the G7. That's what I expressed and explained during my speech, and we will make some proposals to the other members in order precisely to take into consideration this new reality.
Thank you so much.
Mr. President, congratulations on identifying inequality as the root cause of so much of the crisis in the world today. And I would like to ask how you would propose reducing this inequality. Can you comment upon Kofi Annan's call for a global New Deal? Since you say the current global order is disintegrating, perhaps a new and more progressive and egalitarian one is possible. Gordon Brown has also called for a global New Deal. And as a follow-up, since there are constant calls for funding for the SDGs and complaints that there isn't enough, would you consider the possibility of transferring some of the money invested in the military into global development, healthcare, education, since my country is quadrupling its investment in nuclear weapons? Thank you.
Look, first we will increase both development and defense. We will reach 0.55% national revenue in terms of development by the end of this mandate. And we will increase our military defense following the guidelines and my commitments during the campaign. And there is no transfer, but I would say a double commitment to increase both. Because I think we have to protect ourselves, for sure. We have to invest. We have to invest as well for the European protection and as well our participation in different operations, for instance, Sahel or Middle East. As for the idea of a global deal or global compact, I do support this idea. You know, in Europe, the Prime Minister of Sweden launched a very similar idea with Kofi Annan, precisely about such a global deal, which is to say we need now a sort of more comprehensive and consistent view of our economic development. And I do support that. And the way for me to address inequalities in this current environment is first increase our investment on development, what we will do, increase our investment on education, health, agriculture, and economic opportunities, because that's the key elements precisely to bridge the gap for a lot of societies. But third, to be consistent on a day-to-day basis with our own economic and financial model. And that's why I do believe now we have to reform in depth our global organization of trade in order to be more respectful with environment and social rules. Second, I do support this idea that we don't sign any trade deal with countries not compliant with Paris Agreement, because our trade deal have to take into consideration our own environmental challenges. And third, I think we have to take new social commitments, especially at the international level, on social rules and social standards. So I do support this idea.
Mr. President, about the Syrian refugee from MTV Lebanon, Alan Dargam. So we feel in Lebanon, or the government also feel that the international community is not given the impression that to help our government to in the process of the Syrian refugee to go home safe. Instead, you're putting so much regulation on us, and on top of that, the UNRWA stopped funding to help the Palestinian refugees. So we have a sense that we're going to face more problems economically, politically, and also security. And instead of being rewarded, we're being punished because we were pioneer help in this crisis.
I mean, if somebody is always trying to help Lebanon, you have it in front of you. I think so. Please. And precisely because I'm extremely committed in helping Lebanon, your president and the prime minister, we organized these 3 conferences, and we pushed very hard to organize the 3 conferences in Brussels, Roma, and Paris to help on the different layers Lebanon in this crisis. But I've always been clear about the fact that if we want to help Lebanon, we need a sustainable solution. The pushback of refugees right now, as you have Idlib and the war in Syria, do you think one sec this is a sensible and sustainable idea? And look at what's happening at the frontier. How much of them are accepted by the Syrian regime? I mean, Mr. Grandi told me 50%. Some NGOs told me they accept everybody except the males. It's impossible to have a sustainable return of the refugees if we don't have a political solution to the crisis. That's why I do want to help Lebanon, Jordan, and Turkey in this crisis and this situation of refugees. But I think it would be a fake solution precisely to propose you an unsustainable option for these refugees, i.e. to force them to go back to Syria. We have very clear rules, clear international rules, and I want us to respect the HCR rules. They have to choose, and we have to respect dignity in such a move. That's why my view is definitely that we have first to fix a political crisis. And I want to work with, obviously, your president and your prime minister in such a work. And that's why our strategy today is to accelerate on the small group and Astana process in order to work with Mr. de Mistura in order, precisely in the coming weeks, to finalize the Constitutional Committee and go to elections, this is a precondition to any return.
Mr. President.
Juste un peu de règle, on va alterner entre la presse francophone et anglophone, simplement, je demande.
Oui, bonjour Monsieur le Président Elsa Conessa pour les Échos. Le président Trump a dit dans son discours
Trump said in his speech that he was willing to sell more gas, coal and oil and soja. Is France willing to buy more American soja and liquid natural gas? I have been clear about the trade agreements. They must comply with the Paris Accord. The negotiations are underway, and they will tackle all these issues quite clearly. It's not France that needs particularly to buy liquid natural gas. We are attached to European and French sovereignty. It's at the heart of our energy policy or strategy, which I will be presenting in a few weeks' time. We're not a state that imports such products. As regards agriculture, I'll be very clear. I believe in European sovereignty, and I have to report to my citizens to guarantee the standards of food. Our citizens don't want the organisms. We are asking our producers to provide high-quality food, and our strategy in the food area is very clear. We will not be importing products that don't comply with European standards. I'm not in favor of that. In your speech, you said that the fight against inequality is one of your priorities, and you also want to invent a new universalism. France has refused to accept the refugee vessel Aquarius. Don't you think that a humanitarian gesture would have been a great thing today, in spite of the rules that you have set. Your question is legitimate. Welcoming the Aquarius vessel would not have been in line with our humanitarian policy. We will be accepting the largest number of refugees who are on the Aquarius ship. We have a European strategy. We see ourselves as mediators. There's a political crisis between Italy and the rest of Europe. Italy has decided no longer to comply with international law, notably military maritime law, which lays down that when a vessel has passengers who are in a humanitarian crisis, they must be able to disembark at the nearest port. So Italy is in violation of this rule. French ports are not the closest ports to that vessel. Malta, at one point, had accepted to accept the vessel. Malta is the closest alternative port, but it had a guarantee that there would be European solidarity. And as we did this summer, France asked several European countries, including Germany, Spain, Portugal, and a few others, to take their share, and we are one of the two countries who has accepted the largest number of refugees since the beginning of this summer political crisis. So this new humanism does not mean accepting the law of the jungle, and I am aware of the tensions that exist. And if I start saying France will be accepting all the vessels that are leaving Africa, I don't believe in this solution. It's not sustainable, nor is it sustainable politically in France. And people who are worried about the strength of migration, the French voters will say they have a president who isn't defending their interests. So humanism is a requirement to respect human dignity. And I am aware of the fact that I am sometimes seen as not giving in to easy humanitarian sentiment. I don't want to support xenophobic extremism, and which will not support would not solve the situation. And I want to work with the countries of origin, with the transit countries to fight against traffickers. We often forget, many of your comments and reports forget the traffickers, the human traffickers. We never talk about the traffickers. And how did they manage to get in this situation? Today, thousands of people are making a lot of money because they are complicit with terrorists. Somebody from Cameroon, Senegal is on a vessel off the coast of Tunisia. They didn't choose to be there. So we must better protect our frontiers in a more humane way, and we will do so with a European approach. We will play our share. We will give asylum to people who are entitled to it, and we will send back to their countries of origin those citizens who have no right to asylum. So I believe in humanism, but I don't believe in the provocation or the easy, facile human sentiment.
Mr. President, please. A few minutes ago,
il faudrait que quelqu'un s'occupe de donner le micro à une personne avec une alternance entre la presse francophone et anglophone. Voilà. Alors, c'est à madame, et puis après, il y aura quelqu'un de la presse francophone.
Thank you. Merci. A few minutes ago, you said you don't want to sign trade deals, quote, with countries not compliant with the Paris Agreement. There is one country that has pulled out of the Paris Agreement. Does that mean you will not sign any trade agreements with the United States of America?
Ça veut dire qu'il n'y a pas de grand accord qui est possible s'il n'est pas conforme aux accords de Paris et à nos propres objectifs. Et je répondais à l'instant à votre confrère français en ce sens. Il peut y avoir des accords qui sont trouvés, par exemple, sur les sujets industriels.
On industrial questions, I discussed this at length with President Trump yesterday. On industrial questions, vehicles, on medical equipment. We're talking about a lot of things at the moment. We must find solutions to equalize tariffs. It's not a major trade treaty. We want to pacify the situation and go. If it's neutral in terms of climate impact, I'm in favor of it. But the time of large trade organizations which are negative in terms of climate change are no longer acceptable to me.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Président. Bertrand Galichet,
Bertrand Galichet of France Inter. You mentioned earlier the question of a reform of the governance of the world. France will be chairing the G7 very soon. What will be what freedom of action will you have with a partner in the G7 such as Donald Trump? Do you have the means of changing things, and will you be making precise, concrete proposals next year? Yes, there are issues on which we are moving forward, are continuing to move forward, and with very great ambitions